What's up, Earth Rockers? It's your boy Shovatar here. I meant to type in Skull Man at the beginning of this run, but I accidentally typed in Skull Ma'am. It doesn't mean anything. It's just a simple mistake, a simple typo. Today, it's the first of two Alucard route runs that I got cooked up for you in the kitchen, in the oven in the kitchen. And so that's what we're doing. It's the Alucard route. Alucard route is in contrast to the Grant route, which is only different from the Cypher route in that there's the addition of the clock tower, the Alucard route is like a completely different part of the game. There's one, two, three, four Alucard only levels that you access halfway through the forest, which I'll talk about which you'll see when we get there. And the Alucard route is generally considered to be more difficult than the Cypher route, and this is for two reasons. The first reason is that Alucard is simply not as good as Sypha. Um, Sypha, as you would see if you watch any of my like Cypher route videos, Sypha is an absolute powerhouse. She basically trivializes the game's combat, which is a big part of what makes the game so difficult. Um, Whereas Alucard is there to trivialize platforming, because what Alucard does, Alucard can turn into a bat and then like fly around, and every second that he spends in his bat form costs you some hearts. So it's not like he can turn into a bat and fly around indefinitely. There's still a limitation to it, but the point of Alucard is to overcome platforming challenges and to give you different like movement options. And Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse is a game where you're not usually going to die to falling off of like the edge of something or like fucking up a jump. There's very few spots in the game where there's really any difficult platforming, which is part of why I love it so much. The but the thing is that So for that reason, Alucard does not give you the same kind of consistent benefit that Sypha does. But the flip side of that is that the Alucard route is designed around Alucard, and that's the second reason why the Alucard route is considered harder. The first reason is that Alucard is not as generally useful as Sypha, and the second reason is because the fact that the levels are designed around Alucard means that you need to use Alucard effectively in order to clear them easily and consistently. And if you've been going through the game without Alucard prior to this point, it's tough to adjust your mindset to the point where you remember that you have this tool available to you. Um, and that's sort of the difficulty is getting in the Alucard mindset, realizing, oh, I could use Alucard to bypass this, or I could use him to do this or do that. Alucard does have some combat capabilities, which I'll talk about more when he actually finally shows up. But generally speaking, he is not useful in combat. He is not a combat character. Scythe is a combat character. Grant and Alucard are more about movement and more about utility. Level 1 and level 3 are going to be or the first half of level 3 are going to be exactly the same. On the Alucard route, it's not until halfway through level 3 that the route split actually occurs. I know I already said that, but it's level 1 again, so I have nothing to say about level 1. So I'm just really killing time until we get to level 4. So the clock tower is available here, and as I said in my Grant videos, you can get Grant to take Grant with you on the Alucard route, and he does make the Alucard route a lot better than just like doing the Alucard route without Trevor, which I think or rather with only Trevor with no companions, which I would never ever recommend. But even though Alucard and Grant are both movement like platforming aid characters, it's not like the Alucard route is based just around tougher platforming, because it isn't really. It's really based specifically around Alucard's bat flying mechanic, to the point that doing it with Grant instead of Alucard is sort of like it makes the hard route of the game, which is the Alucard route, like extra hard. And I don't have any interest really in doing that because for one thing, I already have like every conceivable. I already have like a million videos and a million pieces of footage of Castlevania 3, and I don't think I really need any more. And two, because I think it would feel sort of silly to go through the Alucard route without the tool that the route is obviously designed around. I think that's a little bit ridiculous. And the Alucard route, generally speaking, is not as fun as the Cypher route. The levels are very hit and miss. Alucard 4 is pretty much fine. Alucard 5 is boring. Alucard 7 is obnoxious. And there are actually two different Alucard 6s. There's like the intermediate difficulty Alucard 6 route, which I call the caves. It's the first level 6, and the second level 6, which is harder than the caves, I call the sunken temple. Some people call it the sunken city, or like the city or the temple. It's an area with a lot of water in it. So if you ever hear me talk about the Alucard caves, I'm talking about Alucard 6-1, and if you ever hear me say the sunken temple, I'm talking about Alucard 6-2, which is the harder of the two levels. Both of these Alucard videos are not going to feature the caves because I think that the Alucard caves are boring. Level 5 is already a cave level, and then level 7 is basically a cave level. So if you pick the Alucard caves, you go from cave level to cave level to cave level, and it's extremely boring. Sunken Temple is the best level in the Alucard route, and it's much more interesting than the alternative. So here we are, finally at the route split, and I'm going to go into level 4, which is a swamp. Level 4 is a lot like level 3, where it's not hard basically at all. Um, there are things about it that are tricky, as is also all too often, as is always the case, it's trickier on hard mode because they throw more bats at you. But the biggest hurdle actually to level 4 is understanding these frogs and understanding sort of how aggressive they are. They're kind of like the fishmen in Castlevania 1 or in parts of this game where they'll jump out at you like that. Um, you just sort of have to anticipate them. You have to be throwing the cross constantly in front of you, and the cross is actually a really great item to have here. For most of Castlevania 3, this like you want like the holy water for bosses, and then like what other situations involving sub weapons are usually very situational. There's very few spots outside of the context of boss fights where you need a specific or you really, really want a specific sub-weapon. And in those cases, it's usually the stopwatch. But I think the cross on level 4 is actually really, really important because there are so many things that just pop up in front of you, like the little mucks, the grimers, the slime men in the swamp, and then the frogs in the very beginning of the level. The level is pretty generous with health. There's actually two big meats very close to each other, which is not really how you want big meats to be spaced out. You want them to be further apart to help you out in different parts of the level. It just so happens in level 4 there's meat in 4-1 and meat in 4-2, which I think is excessive, but I think it's meant to mitigate the fact that a lot of the damage that you take comes from unpredictable sources, like things popping up in front of you. But like I just said, the remedy for that, the solution to that, is to use the cross and be very, very cautious, be very generous with just throwing the cross in front of you to anticipate anything popping up and hitting you. And you're going to see me, and you saw me do that a lot before. I'm going to do that again here. I think I actually don't do it enough. Yeah. So even when you're taking like all these precautions, those things can still hit you. So level 4 is tricky in that sense, and it's easy to take damage on it, but I really almost never die on level 4. And it's already over actually. The level is not only easy, it's super short to compensate for the fact that you have to do half of level 3. And the boss is also super easy with the cross. Look at that. That was like what, 4 shots? The cross is good for level 4 itself, and then as you saw right there, it's exceptional for the level 4 boss. Because otherwise, basically it's a bat that splits up into smaller bats, and that can kind of get out of control. The bats can go in strange directions, so that's just the safest way to get that done. And now here we are in level 5, a level that you might notice if you look at the time at the top of the screen has a 10-minute time limit, and that's because the level is full of rooms like this where there's acid falling from the ceiling to reveal alternative paths through the rooms. And you might think that the acid dripping from the ceiling to expose alternate paths is supposed to reward your patience. Like, oh, if you sit here and wait for the acid to dissolve all the blocks, you can get to like an easier route. But no, it's actually exactly the opposite. Where the path opened up by the acid, I've never even done it, but it looks like it's way more difficult and complicated than just taking the route that is initially available to you without having to do any waiting. So I think there was like a misconception there where the devs thought that having to navigate the acid dripping from the ceiling would be like difficult. It would be something that would be like a challenge that you'd have to overcome, and then you'd be rewarded for overcoming that challenge with the easier top route. But the fact is that avoiding the acid drops is just not really that hard. And if they hit you, they don't even do that damage. That much damage, rather. Even on hard mode, in which everything usually does 4 damage, acid drops only do like 3 damage. And the reason I'm standing still here is because I think I'm using the bathroom where I'm getting some water or something. And this is an ideal place to get up and walk around in the middle of a run because I have 10 minutes of time and I'm not going to use probably half of that. So That's why I'm doing this here and now, and also there's no hazards. Yeah, so I think there's a sort of like a misalignment there between developer expectations and how the level actually plays in terms of the whole acid dissolving the blocks thing. Because you can see down there in that lower area, like look at those like tricky ass jumps with the fuzzball going on the platform. That looks like that actually looks like a fucking nightmare. So I don't know what that's about. I mean, I guess to be fair, maybe it's safer to just stand still and let the acid dissolve, like dissolve everything. In if your only concern is not taking any damage, but all that's going to do is open you up to like a more difficult route where you're probably going to take damage. So it doesn't make much sense to me. I feel like I've never understood it. Maybe it is to reward boldness and to punish playing overly safely. Maybe it is to encourage you to just like learn like brave the acid patterns and get rewarded with with an easier path. I don't really know. I don't know much about the thought process that went into the Alucard route, but I suspect that not that much went into it. The Alucard route is generally not good, and it's because like I don't know if you've noticed this as you're watching this footage, but this level is fucking boring. Like this is a boring level. I think I've only fought like five enemies, and most of them barely moved. And I think I'm almost at the end of the stage. Yeah, this is almost the end of the stage. Kind of. There's an asterisk there. You can actually avoid getting hit by those guys there. If I had jumped as soon as I landed on that platform, I think I would have been fine. But I guess I was nervous about, and I'd done that before, but I was nervous about jumping. I guess because I didn't want to like get hit by the fuzzball as I was jumping up and maybe get like knocked back. But by not jumping, I ultimately got hit. So that's bad. So here we are in the level 5 boss, actually the first level 5 boss, because if you go the Alucard Caves routes, you go through the second half of level 5. This is the first boss of level 5, which is Alucard himself, and you will notice that Alucard bears a striking resemblance to Dracula. And I have my own theory about this, which is utterly unfounded, not based on any information that I have available to me. But I get the overwhelming feeling that because okay, so Alucard obviously is Dracula's son, right? Uh, Look at that action shot. I'm so glad I nailed that on this attempt that I succeeded. That's how I started like having fun towards the like the end of all these runs that I was recording was trying to line up the orb hitting me to get like as the whip was extending all the way, and then I got it in midair too. Oh, and check this out. Trevor's gonna run in place for a few seconds. Yeah, he gets stuck on the block and then he runs in place. I think that's funny. Trevor is awfully trusting. Like this guy's obviously evil, but all he says is, "I need you to help me to destroy Dracula." And he says, "Okay, sure." I mean, I guess if you beat the shit out of somebody, they become a lot less threatening. I wouldn't really know. But my theory about Alucard is that the Dracula, okay, Dracula in Castlevania 3. The Dracula boss fight in Castlevania 3 is almost nothing like the Dracula boss fight in Castlevania 1 in terms of the mechanics of the boss itself. Whereas on the Alucard fight that you just saw, that's like a carbon copy of, well, not exactly a carbon copy, but it's so similar to the Dracula fight in Castlevania 1, it makes you feel like was this character supposed to be like the Dracula from Castlevania 1? Because Castlevania 1 is a sequel to this. This is a prequel to Castlevania 1. I don't know, that's just my like schizo theory. I don't know anything about what the developers were intending. Um, but now I have Alucard, and Alucard is the son of Dracula, and he can turn into a bat and he can shoot fireballs. The fireballs, he starts off shooting one fireball, but then sort of like Trevor, who can upgrade his whip, you can upgrade the one fireball to two fireballs and then three fireballs. And when I first got Alucard, I was so fucking psyched because I'd been spending so much of the game getting my shit pushed in by bats and birds and Medusa heads and skulls, and I was like, holy shit! Now I have this like tri-directional attack that seems like it's specifically designed to counter enemies like that are hard to hit and that are airborne and that are fast. But the sad reality is that Alucard's fireballs don't do any damage at all. I mean, they do damage, like it's technically possible to kill things with the fireballs, but to illustrate what I mean, they don't one-shot Medusa heads. They one-shot bats and birds. They don't one-shot Medusa heads. They don't one-shot skulls, and they don't one-shot like fishmen. They don't one-shot things that that Grant and Sypha one-shot with their default attacks. So so it's very much he's not really a combat character. Although there is an exception. There's a big exception which I'll be talking about pretty shortly when I get to it. But something that you might notice is that I'm only what 14, 15 minutes into this run, and I'm already on level 6, which is kind of funny. But the reason for that is because the route split that happens halfway through level 5 will take you either to this level or to the second half of level 5, and then onto the Alucard caves in level 6. And I mentioned something earlier about how the Alucard route is difficult because it's all about figuring out Alucard's capabilities. This is a prime example of that. Fighting that guy is a gigantic pain in the ass trying to fight him on that tiny platform, but you can completely ignore him with Alucard. And that's like kind of how you have to think when you're on the Alucard route in order to make it uh what's the word I'm looking for? I guess easier to do or like plot or like make it easier on yourself is take advantage of what Alucard can do. That's what the game wants from you. And this is actually another example of when you don't want holy water for a boss fight. I actually want to hold on to the cross. There's holy water earlier in the level, but I skipped it because I want to hold on to the cross for the boss fight coming up at the end of this level. And the boss at the end of this level is probably one of the hardest bosses in the game, but I found a particular way of dealing with him that I'm not going to spoil until you guys see it because it's also going to illustrate a really important point. But another thing to note about Alucard, because this is going to be relevant pretty soon, is that so Grant has kind of a lackluster default attack in the knife, the little shank that he has, but Grant can use sub-weapons. He can use the axe, he can use daggers if he absolutely has to. Alucard cannot use any sub-weapons except for the stopwatch. So that's basically the game's way of telling you explicitly that Alucard is not meant to really be participating in combat. He's meant to be avoiding combat because he can freeze time and then he can like fly around. He's not there to fight things. That's Trevor's job. That's Trevor's job. That's Sypha's job. That's in certain niche situations Grant's job. And that's actually what makes Alucard interesting to me because he's the only companion who doesn't take more damage than Trevor. He takes the same amount of damage that Trevor does. And you'd think he's like this huge imposing guy with like a cape who like doesn't who could take more hits than the other companions, but he's like not useful in combat. That actually makes him interesting to me. And I guess there's some synergy there in that one of the balancing factors of Alucard's bat form, of which there are many, is that if he takes damage while he's a bat, he won't get knocked back, but it'll cancel bat form, and you have to reapply it before you can start flying again. And the reason that I'm farming hearts back there is because the section after the level 6 boss is in 2 phases. Phase 1 is going to be right here, and then the section after phase 1 is really tricky and made much easier with excessive use of the stopwatch. And there's a second reason why I want a bunch of hearts is because I'm actually going to fight this guy with Alucard, and that has to do with the way that this boss is designed. This boss is designed so that whenever he takes damage, as you'll notice there, bits of his like skeletal tail will drop off. And the fact that he becomes smaller, he becomes faster when he becomes smaller, but just the fact that he becomes smaller, there's less of him on the screen, means that he's actually easier to dodge. And all he needs to do to drop sections off doesn't matter how much damage he takes. If he just takes damage, he loses sections. So that's why I'm fighting him with Alucard, because Alucard can hit him a bunch of times really easily, and because Alucard can always dodge out of the way of his patterns of attack by just turning into a bat, as you saw several times back there. So that's why I fight him with Alucard. Even though it would be faster to fight him with Trevor, because Trevor with the cross would do way more damage, Alucard is safer because you always have an exit option. You always have an option to escape from his attacks, but it's jumping away from him and turning into a bat and like reassessing the situation. Because patterns are really difficult to read. Like it's really hard to figure out what he's doing at any given moment and make sure that you're gonna be able to avoid him. Because the patterns that he takes are sort of they can be sort of circuitous, and that's especially the case at the very beginning he when he's really long and has a long tail. And that's the other reason why I farmed a bunch of hearts, to make sure I would always have hearts to stay in bat form during that boss fight if I wanted to, and have enough hearts to get through this part here, to just skip all the way to this boss as quickly as I possibly can. That little bit that I did there with the bat going across the bottom of the screen, that's not super important on normal mode. On this level, on hard mode, it's a lot more important, but of course I'll have to talk about that in a different video. And here I am. This is the best way to deal with the second phase of the boss, and he goes down. And that phase is actually really hard because you have such a limited area to move around in, and there's a time limit. The water rising on the bottom of the screen there, if that water gets too high, you're sunk. And it's tough to like kill that guy quickly while he's zooming around the screen like that in this enclosed area where you like can't really get at him, and that's the best way to do it. Is just try to hit him with the cross as soon as he shows up, and then keep throwing crosses and wait for his goofy ass flying route to cause him to intercept one of the crosses. And that's why the cross is really good against both phases of that boss in general, but against that phase of the boss specifically, because you need to kill him fast. You can't just do the Alucard take your time strat there. I pick up the axe here. I guess just to do that, just to kill the Igors before they can get out of the block prison. But I don't think it's really necessary. So here we are in Alucard 7. This is the worst level in the entire game. Partially because of reasons like this. So in level 5, going quickly in the acid dissolving rooms was like a reward and it gave you an easier route. In Alucard 7, I guess they decided that making the player wait for acid to dissolve paths was like a good idea. So you have two stages or two rooms that are completely worthless and could be completely skipped. The second room of 7-1 and then the entirety of 7-3 coming up here shortly. All terrible. And this is an interesting thing that you can do with Alucard where I think I fucked up the jump. Like, I think I jumped too early. If I hadn't transformed into Alucard, I would have fallen in the gap between those two platforms and fell in the water. If you have Alucard and you feel like you fucked up a jump and you're about to die, you can just swap to Alucard and then activate the bat mid-air and then get out of it and then go right back to Trevor and go right on with what you were doing. And that's a great safety net that he provides and is one of, sort part of what I mean when I talk about how he makes platforming easier, where you can either avoid platforming, or if you fuck up the platforming and you don't want to like spend all the hearts that it would take to skip an entire platforming section with the bat, you can just use him sparingly, as minimally as possible, just to recover from mistakes like that. So that's actually why I think Alucard is the worst of the companions, and I don't like his route, but I still think he's really interesting as a gameplay mechanic character. This is another thing about, and this is also an example of what I mean when I talk about this level being designed around Alucard. If I didn't have Alucard, I would have to fucking sit here and wait for these blocks to stack up to that ledge. And who the fuck would ever do that and think that it's fun? The answer is nobody who's ever been born. So doing this route without Alucard is, I think, completely pointless and just setting yourself up to be completely miserable. And there's an even better example of that, which you'll see in 7.5, which you'll see after this. Um, so yeah, that's why Alucard is good, is because they designed his route specifically around to make sure that he would be good, to give him places to shine. And this is actually going to be another niche example of Alucard's combat capabilities coming up here shortly. I really want the Holy Water for Trevor because the level 7 boss is going to be a big monster mash. It's going to be mummies, Cyclops, demon, and I want the holy water for the mummies, so I can't hold on to the cross to kill this mini boss again, but instead I can just kill it with Alucard, because just like the bone dragon, what prompts the bats to split is just taking damage. You don't have to do a certain amount of damage. And then once they're split down to their smallest form, they just die in one hit, even from one of Alucard's fireballs. So Alucard is actually uniquely suited to kill that boss. He's pretty much as good as the cross, if not better. And here's 7.5, here's what I was talking about. If I didn't have Alucard, I would have to wait for all those blocks to stack all the way up here to get out of the level. Now, let me ask you something. Have you ever heard of anything more psychopathic than that in your entire life? And you might not understand like how long it takes the blocks to get up to that ledge, but it's a long fucking time. I've seen it happen, and it's actually bad design. And as much as I love this game, this is like one of my favorite games I've ever played. I think Alucard 7 is pretty much indefensible, especially 7.5 and then 7.1 and then 7.3, with like the acid dissolving the blocks. There's absolutely no reason for the level to be designed in the way that it is, because even with Alucard, like because imagine if I had died. Like imagine if I died on 7.5 because I like fucked. I like didn't know the block spacing or something like that, and like didn't and like came into that stage with like 5 hearts. Now I don't have enough hearts to fly up to the top. So it's like you get one fucking chance, and you can die. You can die in 7.5 in plenty of places, because after the block section, there's the section with the spiders and the section with those two birds. Fortunately, I had a stopwatch to deal with them, but like you could easily die after the block section, then go back to the block section and have 5 hearts and not be able to use the bat to get up to the top again. So it's like it's like, why did they do that? It's just a poorly designed stage. It's just poorly designed. There's no other way to describe it. I don't say that about this game very often, but that's, I think, pretty indisputable. So 7-7, um, this is sort of the icing on the cake. This is the end of the road. It's a vertical auto scroller, ladies and gentlemen. So we go from waiting for acid to dissolve blocks to waiting for more acid to dissolve blocks to waiting for rocks to fall to waiting for an auto scroller, which is why this is the worst level in the whole game. Only mitigated by Alucard, and specifically in the context of like a Deathless run, to make sure that you can stockpile hearts and then utilize them to use Alucard to get past the more obnoxious sections. Um, Alucard 7 is also a really long level. It's partially padded out by the fact that 7-3 is pretty much just a room with acid, but it's a very long level, and I suspect that's done intentionally to counterbalance the fact that the route can feel pretty short without that. Because level 4 is really short because it's like supposed to make up for the first half, because it's only supposed to like add on to the first half of level 3, and then level 5 can be really short, and then like level 6 is actually like a full length level. So um, so that's why I think this is as long as it is. And to make matters worse, this is actually the real problem with with this level, is the fact that it's topped off with a monster mash. Because the mummies are such like fucking assholes. Like the mummy fight in level 4 on the Cipher route, it's easy to do with just the whip because of the way that the look at that shit. See, I should those fucking mummies. I fucking hate them. On I'll have plenty of time to talk now because now the Cyclops is coming out. On level 4 of the Cipher route, the terrain in the room is arranged in such a way that it's definitely it's totally viable to kill the mummies just with the whip, because you can stand behind this little platform and then hit them as they're coming out, and they can't walk into you because they can't walk through the platform. But in level 7, there's no there's no terrain like that. So you have to get all the way through level 7 to get to the mummy fight with a good sub weapon for killing the mummies in order to have any chance of clearing the rest of the encounter, because because you don't have good terrain to kill them with just the whip, and because you need to not take damage from the mummies to make sure you can like survive the rest of the fight. And the problem with that is that the sub weapon availability in level 7 is just not good. There's holy water in 7-2, and then there's a cross in 7-6, but the cross in 7-6 is part of the Medusa gauntlet with the collapsing platforms. So like it's risky to even go for that, because there's like spikes above you. There's like just so much, and there's like Medusa heads knocking you around. It's like risky to go for that, and even that basically what that means is that if you die on 7-7 at any point, now you're stuck without a sub weapon. So it's like you might as well just fucking like reset the level in that case, because now you have to walk into this mummy fight with no sub weapon and you're fucked. So that's the real problem, the big problem with level 7, even in a casual playthrough, is the fact that if you die on 7-7, now you're left without any useful sub weapons. And and that combined with the shitty terrain of the fight is a serious problem. And you might be thinking, well, why not use Alucard, right? To fight the mummies. Like just get a bunch of range on them, whip out Alucard, have him like fireball to shoot their projectiles, and then just like and just take your time killing them. Problem with that, you won't believe this. Alucard's fireballs don't destroy the mummy's projectiles. It takes 2 fireballs from Alucard to destroy a fucking bandage projectile from the mummies. You don't understand how little damage Alucard does. Alucard is completely worthless, except for the level 6 boss and then the level 7 mini boss. Those are the only 2 combat situations in the entire game where Alucard is even close to viable. He's completely worthless on the Monster Mash. And it's especially galling because they have that high platform up on the top left, which, like, you could only get there with Alucard, but once you're there, like, what the fuck are you supposed to do? Like, he can't do anything. It's like, I don't get it. I don't get the level 7 Monster Mash. I don't get um, like what the terrain is supposed to enable you to do. I don't get what that platform is supposed to be there for. Um, So that's what I hate the most about the Alucard route is level 7, and it's why I can't bring myself to do the Alucard caves because I need like a good level to counterbalance that shitty level, and the Sunken Temple is a way better level than the caves. So fortunately, the routes have reconvened. There's no more shitty Alucard levels. We're back in level 8. And what's surprising about um, what's especially illustrative of the way that the Alucard routes are designed is that there's very few spots in levels 8, 9, or A where Alucard is super useful. And am I getting up to? Am I stopping to? Okay, I don't know what's going on here because maybe I had to get up and like go deal with something. I don't know. Maybe I had to like take laundry out. I don't know. But we're gonna take another break here. We're gonna stop for a second again. Yeah, there's very few spots in levels 8 or 9 or A where Alucard is useful like at all, which really goes to show how aggressively level 7 and then the other Alucard levels are designed around Alucard. The thing about the Medusa Gauntlet with the collapsing platforms is that I've always gotten the impression that they want you to use Alucard there. But the thing about that is that when Alucard is a bat, he the way he has like momentum to the way that he moves, so it's hard for him to like quickly change directions or like go up and down once he's in the bat. So it's actually harder to dodge Medusa heads as a flying bat than it is as Trevor, where he can either whip them or just keep walking past them, and you can make that decision like in a second. Whereas with Alucard, the fact that the bat is like slow to change direction and that he has this like momentum mechanic means that it's hard for him to get out of the way of things quickly, which is what you need to be able to do if you want to get out of the way of any Medusa heads. But yeah, level 8 is very enclosed, very bunch of hallways, nowhere for Alucard to do anything. Um, Alucard is sort of useful in 9, um, but not really, as you'll see when we get to that. And that sucks right there, the fact that the skull hit me, because that was actually almost a no damage level 8. I had a no damage Sunken Temple, and I think once I like noticed that, I was like, oh shit, I wonder how many more levels I can get no damage on. And then like that was almost a no damage level 8, but oh well. It doesn't matter. I'll never go for like a no damage run because I think that's a little bit much. No, no disrespect to the people who are insane enough at this game to do it, but that's just not something that interests me. I'll stick to the deathless runs. So my strategy for 9-2, which is a big problem area in this game, a gigantic difficulty spike, is not going to involve Alucard at all. And that might seem strange because on the Grant route, when I was doing the Grant routes, I would stopwatch spam. But I've learned from extensive trial and error that the Grant stopwatch spam only really worked because I was playing as Grant. Because Grant can move more quickly, and for that reason, he can get out of the way of things within the 3 second window of the stopwatch that other characters can't. So stopwatch spam to get through 9-2 is like sort of a Grant only thing. You could maybe use the stopwatch to get through like the very end of the stage, but what you really want is a consistent way to cheese the entire thing, and that's no longer on the table right now. You might think that I could use Alucard to like turn into a bat and then just like fly all the way up through 9-2 and like just avoid everything. That's not going to work because 9-2 is a bunch of turrets shooting back and forth. It's a bunch of gargoyles zooming up and down. Like trying to navigate that as the bat with like how clunky, like not clunky, but like with how like slow to respond to your input the bat is, you're just going to get hit over and over and over again, and you're going to have to keep turning back into the bat, and it's just not good. So instead, I just opted to clear this only with Trevor. And there's a very specific timing that I do here, where as soon as that gargoyle gets past me, I run all the way up here so I could be in position right after that second fireball shoots out and kill that turret super fast. Because if you don't do that, it's a pain in the ass to like get in position to hit that turret and then also be in position to be able to avoid that turret's shots and be in position to react to any gargoyles that spawn. Because I don't entirely understand the gargoyle spawns in this room because usually like the Medusa head spawns in like Castlevania 1, for example, are based off of the direction you're facing. And I assumed that the gargoyle spawns are the same way, but I swear sometimes they'll spawn on a side of the screen that I'm like not facing. So I don't quite understand that. It might be that it checks to see where you're facing like a few seconds before it spawns or something. I don't know. But the point is that I didn't have an easy way to get through 9-2. I just had to do like pure um, focused, like Trevor only get through 9-2, and I did that without taking any damage. So this is a good example of I think how much my gameplay improved as I recorded all this footage and I did all these playthroughs. Um, it's like there are mistakes that I made in earlier videos that I can't imagine making now, like that, or like this right here. Yeah, so right as I'm sucking my own dick talking about how good I am at this game, I get destroyed by the skeleton and by the fuzzball. And what went wrong there is that if you don't move properly, you can push that skeleton over to the right because he'll move like opposite. He'll if he's like to the right of you, he'll shift further to the right, and if he's to the left of you, he'll shift further to the left. And I didn't want to like turn into Alucard to try to get around the fuzzball. I just couldn't figure out a way to get around him. And honestly, what I could have done there if I really wanted to was turn into Alucard and then shoot fireballs at the skeleton through the floor to hit it. But there, I think I just had like a brain freeze or something, or I didn't want to do that. I just didn't care. I just wanted to go. So that's what I did. So ironically, I get through 9-2 without taking any damage, and then I take 2 fucking damage on 9-3, where it's like it's usually supposed to be exactly the opposite. I don't know why I'm so averse to using Alucard here. I could be using Alucard to like not do this last jump and get up to the platform there, but for some reason I don't want to. I don't know if I'm paranoid. I'm probably paranoid about conserving my hearts because I want to get through 9-4 with a stopwatch usage and also with the Alucard bat. And this is another thing that makes Alucard really good. Same thing that makes Grant really good is that this is the one place in 8, 9, and A where Alucard really shines. Two places. This is the first one. The fact that he lets you skip most of 9-4, which is like it's like so important. It's like if he didn't do anything else but this, he would still be really good. The simple fact that he lets you skip most of this one room is so worth it. And even then, like I think what I wanted to do there was freeze time as soon as I dropped down on that ledge to not get hit by that bird, but I just didn't do it fast enough. I guess maybe I could freeze time before turning into a bat and flying over there, but I don't know if that would give me enough time, and it really doesn't matter anyway because you can going into the doppelganger fight with 3 HP is totally safe. 1 HP is like a little bit risky because he could break out of the holy water stun lock that I set up here if I don't like time my throws right. But I've got a triple shot multiplier, so the chances of him breaking out are very low, meaning 3 health is perfectly safe. Um, I've never tried fighting the doppelganger as Alucard. I can't think of any good reason at all to do that, so that's why. And now we're on to level A. Now we're on to level A. We're in the home stretch. And do I turn into Alucard to fight these birds? No, I probably could. Like Alucard, as much as I shit talk his combat capabilities, like he's good at killing birds. 3 directions, 1 fireball each direction. Birds get 1 shot. Not a problem. And I think I pick up the axe here on Trevor. No, I don't. Okay, I'm specifically trying to avoid it. I don't really know why I'm doing that. I guess because if you don't have the stopwatch to kill the turrets in in A1, then like the holy water is like the next best thing. But the thing is that I do have a stopwatch because Alucard has the stopwatch on, so I don't quite know I don't quite know why I like didn't want to get the axe there because getting the axe in A1 is actually nice because it makes A2 very slightly easier, and you want an axe anyway for the Dracula fight. So I don't really know why I made that decision. Um, I also don't know why I didn't have Alucard out during during any part of A1. Oh, actually, I do know why. It's because I want to use the stopwatch here. I don't want to use any stopwatches on A1 if I can avoid it. And what's interesting about the stopwatch is that you can activate the stopwatch with one character and then swap to another character, and the timer will not tick down while you're doing that. So this guy can stay frozen and Trevor can take advantage of the stopwatch even though Trevor doesn't have the stopwatch. And I think the reason that my heart usage is sort of strange here is because at the very end of A2, right before the Dracula fight, there's like the real final boss, which is a couple of jumps you have to do across these pendulums while Dracula's coming at you, or no, or while bats are coming at you rather, and Dracula lets you completely skip that. I think there's a. I don't think Dracula can skip past that turret without taking damage from it. Usually, like that turret at the very end there's like collapsing platforms right in front of the turret, which means that trying to kill the turret is really risky. Because if you don't move while the turret is shooting at you, or if like the turret shoots you into a gap that was created by the crumbling floor, then um, you get instantly killed, and it's much easier, it's much safer to just like guarantee you take one damage and not deal with the open spike pits at all than it is to try to not take any damage and then risk instant death. So usually getting past that turret involves just taking damage from it and then just jumping over it. But Grant can actually get past it without taking any damage at all. Alucard, I guess, can't. I thought maybe the bat could squeeze in there, but I don't think he can. And this is what I was talking about a second ago with the pendulum swinging back and forth and the bats coming at you from the side of the screen. Alucard can just totally avoid this. And you you want, if when you do that, you are going to want to stay closer to the top of the screen than I think I was there, because the thing is that when Alucard gets knocked out of bat form, he can go right back into bat form, but there are a few frames. There's like a brief span of time after Alucard gets takes damage that he can't like turn back into the bat, and you are gonna fall during that time. So if you're in bat form and then you take damage and you're close enough to the bottom of the screen, like you can fall to the bottom of the screen and die before you have a chance to turn back into the bat again. So that's the one caveat to using the bat for extended periods of time. Is you need to keep in mind that you can switch back into the bat form after you take damage, but you can't do it immediately. So you have to be cautious about that. Unfortunately, my stinginess with hearts meant that I didn't have to do hardly any heart farming at all for the Dracula fight. So that's good. Um, Unlike Grant and Sypha, Alucard is totally unhelpful for the Dracula fight. Um, Maybe there's something he could do in phase one, like using the bat to like go over fire pillars, but that's pointless because that just takes you away from Dracula, and you have to get close to Dracula again to hit him. So there's really no reason to play phase one of Dracula any differently from how I was just doing it there. And in phase three of Dracula, I guess I guess Alucard could serve as a get out of jail free card. Like if you fall off a platform and you think you're about to die, you could swap to Alucard and then switch into bat form. But um, but there's no reason to fuck around with the platforms and jump around on them when this option is available to you of just using the axe and then just playing it safe on the ground. I guess that does mean I can be a little bit more cavalier about jumping on the platforms because I know I have a tool to get me out if I do get knocked off. But but generally speaking, Alucard is not going to be a factor in the Dracula fight or for the rest of the game. Frankly, it's interesting. He's basically just there to get you through the Alucard stages. It's like the Alucard stages and then 9-4, and then he completely stops being useful, which is sad, kind of. It's because like Sypha you get for free basically because you get her on the easiest route, and all she helps you out with is the combat, so she's almost always going to have something she could do for you. And then with Grant, it's like he is only super helpful with the 9-4 skip, and then everything else he does is like convenience. But he's not. But Grant is useful beyond just the clock tower. Alucard is not useful very much beyond the Alucard stages. And I don't think they really had a choice with that because like if designing these stages like around Alucard would just make it fucking impossible to do it with Sypha or Grant. So I guess it kind of sucks that Alucard's usages are so narrow, but that's also probably the best possible decision they could have made was to make it so that he was like not super impactful for the rest of the game as a result of the level design because that would be really punishing if you picked somebody besides Alucard. I hope that sentence made sense. Anyway, that's the Alucard route. This is, I think, one of the fastest clears I've ever done. I don't know if that's because of like the path that I took through the Alucard route. Probably is. Um, but I think it's also just because my level of familiarity with the game has gone way up. Interesting note about the name Alucard. Obviously, Alucard is Dracula spelled backwards. I think that first appeared in a 1940s movie called Son of Dracula. But in the movie Son of Dracula, Alucard is just an alias that Dracula uses. Alucard is not like a different character who's the son of Dracula. So I wonder if like the Japanese knew that the name Alucard is from a movie called Son of Dracula and thought that Alucard was the son of Dracula. Or maybe it was just like a reference. I don't know. Either way, you'll notice that Alucard in this game looks very, very different from Alucard in later in the series. He looks basically just like Dracula, which is part of why I have my weird theory that I might have mumbled something out about earlier, where it's like I don't know anything about the behind the scenes story development of the game, but it did strike me how different the Dracula fight in Castlevania 3 is from the Dracula fight in Castlevania 1. And it's strange that like Alucard is exactly the same as Castlevania 1 Dracula and not really anything like Castlevania 3 Dracula. So, I don't know, maybe it doesn't mean anything. Obviously, whatever the initial intent would have been. Obviously, they did not ultimately decide to establish that they were like different Draculas throughout the eras. But that was just something that I noticed. And that's the run. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys were able to get something out of my ramblings. There will be a hard mode 1cc of the Alucard route coming up shortly after this. You guys are the best ever to do it in the internet. That's how I feel. Skull Nam. That's me. I wish I could have kept. I should have kept the exclamation mark actually instead of like trying to salvage it. But anyway, as I was saying, I'm signing off. This is it. This is the end of the road. This is the end of the show. Thank you for playing. Presented by Konami. Presented by me, Shovatar. That's the end of the video.